What was the dumbest thing you ever saw someone do with a corporate credit card?
Hey, subscribe to Reddit Storytime for more sublime stories.
Story 1. I worked at a strip club back in the 90s, and a customer ran up a $3,500 tab on his corporate Amex and left without closing it out. A few days later we got a visit from the police as he reported the card stolen. Thing is, he was a regular and we had plenty of video footage of him getting lap dances while wearing his corporate-issued polo shirt. He not only got fired but was charged with filing a false police report, which led to his wife divorcing him for being such a stripper-loving idiot. Story 2. I used to audit corporate card purchases for a Fortune 50 company. I caught a guy trying to buy a $30K boat from Bass Pro and a $15K walk-in humidor. When I worked in audit, we did the same thing at the request of the K. Turns out our CISO was charging over $30K a month on her card by breaking pretty much every corporate expense policy there was. All flights were first class, hired personal drivers everywhere she went instead of taking a taxi, $200 plus dinners at high-end restaurants almost every night, suites at the nicest hotels resorts in the area, $300 plus spa visits at any hotel that had one, etc., etc., etc. She was promptly asked to step down. Also had a senior manager who knew he was getting fired go out and buy all of his employees everything he could that would just barely be within policy, so the company would have trouble coming after him for the money. New laptops, additional monitors, company cell phones, briefcase bags, and approved any and all training they wanted to take even if it required unnecessary travel. Think he racked up almost $40K in his last week with the company. Story 3. I don't know that this is dumb since it was legit, but it's still shocking to me. I was at a conference with the big partners from my firm and got invited out to dinner with them and a prospective client. There were about 8 of us in total at a nice steakhouse. I'm a wine fan, and they had a nice list. Partner indicated that my counterpart with client also liked wine and that we should order a few bottles. Partners and CEO were drinking scotch. When we got the tab, it was $17,000. I was of course the only one surprised by this. It was with it too, since we probably billed the client that within the first week, but damn. A coworker and I took a bunch of clients to dinner one year, like 25 of us. Clients started drinking Irish car bombs, which turned out to be crazy expensive. Dinner was something like $700, bar bill was around $4,000. We hadn't been given an upper limit for the trip, so we didn't get in too much trouble, but we were told we would definitely not do that again. Story 4. A few years back it came to light that my mother, the head accountant at a mid-sized company, had been using company cards and creative accounting for nearly a decade to the tune of at least $100K. They stopped investigating when they hit that number because it was enough to pass the threshold for the maximum felony penalty. We became aware of her crimes when she went missing and ended up attempting suicide the night before her arraignment. Her suicide attempt was unsuccessful, but she finally went through with it a little more than a year later on the night before she was set to begin serving her sentence. The whole thing has upended my life. It clarified that prosecutors stopped at $100K because that was the threshold for maximum sentencing, not the threshold to be charged with a felony. Story 5. Guy was overseas on a business trip in Eastern Europe and in an establishment he shouldn't have been in. Decided to buy a round of drinks figuring no one would know from the name of the place what it was. Unfortunately later he was enjoying the pleasures of a lady that worked in the establishment, and having run out of cash, forgotten he had used his work card to buy the drinks when agreeing to specific services being offered by the employee. And was then surprised to be questioned by the FD a month later on why a restaurant he had bought drinks in was also charging him a €50 supplement for ale. Story 6. Worked at a retail company that gave all of its store managers corporate cards. The cards had high limits on them, so the store managers could use it instead of maintaining petty cash on hand or having to use personal cards while traveling for training. While visiting one of the stores, I asked where their Keurig machine was. I wanted a coffee, and the closest Starbucks was a few blocks away. I had seen the manager submit her expense report with a purchase for a Keurig machine, K-cups, a small bathroom fixture, and a few other things. The assistant manager says we don't have a Keurig machine. After looking into it further, turns out the manager had been using the card to buy several personal items over the last few years. Ended up repaying a little over $20K in purchases. Story 7. When working away, while not officially authorized, but never queried, it was generally accepted the manager there would take the workers out for a couple of drinks at the end of whatever we were doing. Not a full piss-up, but a round or two at the nearest bar where we were staying. Manager had been out most of the day with another boss drinking when we finished work late in the afternoon. We went to the bar to have a few beers and something to eat at the hotel we were staying at. It's okay, I'll get this one. About 5 rounds later we were all like, are you sure this is fine? Shift single quote SS okay. I'm a decent drinker, but even I was rat-arsed at the end of the night. Wake up around 10 am and go down for food. Apparently the majority of the booze drank that night went on the card. We officially didn't get in trouble. But now you can only use the company card for sanctioned work events. Story 8. Not quite a corporate credit card, but in the same vein. Many years ago, when I was in college, our student government had a retreat near the start of the year. The college agreed to reimburse for food, so they submitted their receipts, including their liquor store receipt. Not only will the college not pay for alcohol, drinking was forbidden at school-sponsored events. Apparently this fact was made abundantly clear to the student government. The entire government had to resign and new elections were held. Story 9. Guy lived across the country and commuted at the beginning and end of every week. For the first few months, any of his flight or lodging expenses could be covered by the company, per his contract. After the time expired, he was expected to have either moved here permanently, or start covering his own transportation and hotels if he chose to keep commuting every week. He simply never stopped charging his company card for it. He tried to get clever with it too, would route his flights through other cities and pretend he was conducting business there, so they were technically supposed to be covered by the company. And would lose hotel receipts thinking it would be impossible to prove that the hotels he was staying in were local to us. After nearly a year of catching these things and having to make him write the company a personal check every month, they finally fired him. Story 10. Purchased lavish dinners at a local surf and turf for himself and his mistress and then claim that the expenses were staff appreciation events. Actually, what got him fired, since when the auditors came they asked employees, what did you do at the staff appreciation event on X date? And we were all like, what staff appreciation event? Honestly, at the time it was hilarious that this was what resulted in his firing, since he was doing so much else that was so much worse. Hired his mistress, slept with her at work and fired everyone who caught them at it. She hired another relative for a basically janitorial role and paid him $30 hour going rate for that position. $10 hour, cut salaries without cause, and claimed it was because they'd maxed out, never attended meetings, stopped paying company bills, large corporation had us on must prepay cash only, which is unheard of for our industry, etc. But the use of the corporate card was what he got canned on, since it was the easiest for them to prove. Story 11. During the 2008 recession, the president of the company took a pay cut, so he just started putting everything on his company card. All the gas for his family's cars, dinners for his daughter's volleyball team, TV for his son's apartment, on and on. No real attempt to hide any of it. The accounting department started complaining about it. He told them to just put it in. Finally, the head accountant just said no, she couldn't sign her name to this stuff anymore. President of the company fired her on the spot, even calling the police to help escort her out of the building, telling them he suspected her of embezzling but couldn't prove it. But he feared for his safety. A year later, the scumbag golden parachuted out of the company. The company barely survived. Story 12. Sister used to work at a company that gave people like her company cards. She used to tell the story of how the cards got limited to about $1,000. A previous sales rep, who worked there years before, went to a major Vegas medical convention. His plan was to woo every big client he could. After his first night, he had all but maxed out his card. He spent the money at a casino, a fancy steakhouse, and of course, lots of clubs. The boss got word and was pissed. The guy had to use his own credit card for the rest of the weekend. Afterwards, we walked into work Monday morning to get chewed out. As we walks in, he finds out that his boss got called by someone who ended up becoming a major client. Oddly enough, it wasn't one of the guys he took out for drinks. It was a guy he met on his last day. He had bought him a coffee. The sales rep got chewed out, obviously, but he got a decent bonus for the sale. And the credit card policy changed because of him. My first job out of college was at the famous Bell Labs. It was absolutely the pinnacle of Rand Labs in its day, and to have a job there was a first-class ticket on the success train. I was one of 2 newbies on my manager's team. The other was, in my estimation, completely unqualified. Bell Labs was making a big effort to recruit women and, with this particular candidate, maybe too much of an effort. We were both ceremoniously handed our AITA and corporate credit cards and were given very careful instructions about what it could and couldn't be used for. Next Monday, I got to work and Shauna was nowhere to be found. A security guard arrived mid-morning and picked up the 1 or 2 things she had left on her desk. Later that day, we were reminded about credit card use policy, but I didn't hear the whole story for another couple of weeks. It seems Shauna decided that corporate credit card meant time buy whatever I've always wanted. Her first stop after getting the card was to buy a $10K fur coat. She went on quite a buying spree before Amex got suspicious and shut her down. Needless to say, my boss was pretty pissed off. Shauna never stepped foot on the premises again. Story 13. Old company I worked for. Give guy corporate card to go buy groceries for the home he was working at. 3 hours later didn't come back or return calls. My boss looked at the account to see if there was any action on it. Lo and behold, a $600 charge for it at Best Buy. Safe to say Dude thoroughly stepped in it and was not answering his phone, but did respond to a text that basically said "fuck you, I quit" the next morning. He was also thoroughly disappointed when he came to get his last check and realized it was about $30 bucks. Story 14. Paid $1,000 for a several-year-old 32-inch LCD TV. I was the resident manager at a hotel, and one sold-out weekend a business center TV died. I offered to run down to my apartment and grab my LCD TV to get us through the event. After the weekend was over, the owner of the hotel was grateful I took the initiative on my own. He told me I could either get a replacement TV for the business center, or give the hotel my old TV and buy a new one for myself. Told me to just keep it under $1,000 and sent me on my way with his card. Pretty big jump from a 32 to a 52 in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment, lol. Story 15. About 5 years ago, it was my department's turn to get the suite at an NBA game for a team my company sponsors. A new guy who was a nepotism hire took it upon himself to keep ordering drinks and food for everyone in the suite, about 15 people. We thought it was a nice, albeit ridiculously over-the-top gesture, but we just figured he wanted to make a good impression and suspected he came from money. The next day, an HR executive stormed onto our floor and had a closed-door meeting with him, and our entire department never got the suite again. That guy later turned out to be blowing the vice president who hired him. Story 16. I had a boss who had a quick meeting with somebody in Sydney, Australia. Naturally, he wanted to fly first class. Well, he couldn't be without his wife, so she came, too. And his kids. Sure, let's throw them on the bill. Well, they couldn't possibly sleep anywhere nasty, so they got 2 suites in a 5-star hotel. Lunch and dinner every day for 4 people, plus entertainment, all on the company dime. For that one 2-hour meeting, he and his family spent 3 weeks on a luxury holiday in Australia. Now, it has been many years, but I believe the flight bill itself came to $35,000. Hotel was $30,000. Dinners, show, entertainment, amusements parks, fancy wines were an equally large sum. In the end, seeing as this was a small company, 3 people were made redundant because this guy drained the pot. He was fired. He quickly came back as a contractor. He the CEO, after all. So his punishment for ruining the lives of 3 people and costing the company, like, $100K was that his family got a nice holiday, and I guess he had to follow some different tax laws or something. Must be nice to be the CEO, huh? And I've just checked on the company. They've recovered, they are doing booming business and he's gone.